Okay, I'm going to go through the next 2 pages of the revision booklet and then have a break before weather and climate. So, what type of weathering is most likely to have occurred on these rocks? Well, you're on top of a mountain, so the answer is freeze thaw. I've decided to write the answers in before because it's quite hard to balance holding the page and this phone at the same time. Right, explain how this type of weathering breaks up rocks. It freezes, ignites, so it expands. Then it thaws in the daytime and continues this process for many days. And eventually the rocks crack off. The diagram here, erosion features. Arch, stump and waterfall are the 3 erosion features. And the beach, spit and floodplain are formed by deposition features. And now, diagram shows a river meander, and we have to do a cross section of it. So I've gone down here, and I've labelled on, so it's shallow on the inside of the meander, here we are. And here you have the river beach, it's shallow water. And on the outside of the meander, you have your river cliff. The water's deep. The undercutting happens at the base of the cliff, and it can create an overhang. To be honest, the overhang normally falls in the water anyway, but as they've asked for it, I thought I'd better put it in. Okay, and now on to the next page. Oh, I've done that, I've labelled the river. 117. Draw a diagram with the detailed labels to show how an arch is formed. We've done this so many times, I just did a quick little sketch. You've got your crack, cave, arch. This eventually collapses, that's meant to signify collapsing, and it forms a stack behind. Arch collapses to form stack. Sorry, not very neatly written, because I wrote stump initially, I made a mistake. Anyway, on to the next question, we're on to flooding now. Are these a cause or effect of river flooding? Monsoons a cause, steep slopes cause, communications destroys an effect. Snowmelt is another cause. Towns built on the floodplain is just stupid, that's a cause. And water spreads disease is an effect. Trees have been cut down for firewood to make space. Deforestation, that's known as, and that's another cause. So the next question, you've got the answers already above. Describe the cause of flooding in an area you've studied. Well, it depends on your choices. I've got down here the Somerset levels. Rivers were silted up. Now you could add in there, if you want to be very advanced, due to government cutbacks. They decided to stop dredging the rivers, and therefore they silted up and then they flooded. So there's a false economy. Continuous rain or winter saturated the ground, so that it had nowhere to go. It was low-lying. Somerset levels is at sea level, so the water couldn't get out. And I chucked in urbanisation, because you can always put that one in. Then the other choice is Bangladesh and LEDC. Snowmelt from the Himalayas. All the answers are above. Deforestation. I've added in monsoon, the monsoon season. And cyclones also cause flooding in Bangladesh. On to B. Humans often badly affected by river floods. Referring to the photograph above, what are the effects for the environment and for the people? So be careful, make sure you get... So effects for the environment are that plants can die. However, this is a positive effect because it does provide a lovely fertile soil and creates a floodplain. So that's a good one. And you get erosion of the riverbanks, so the riverbanks get destroyed. And how are people in the area affected? Well, economic hardship's always a good phrase, because that basically anyone loss of any income, call it economic hardship. That covers many, many things. Homeless and transport routes destroyed. Now on this note here, currently, I feel very sad because this winter we had tremendous floods. I don't know if you remember that. And a lot of people were made homeless and had to go and live in temporary accommodation. And now they're still there and they've been shut down. So now homes are still flooded, so they can't live in their homes. So they're staying in temporary accommodation and they are locked down. That must be awful. I mean, imagine if they didn't have Wi-Fi. So some people are really struggling from the floods we had this winter. Yeah, I got us on the board at the back there. So there we are. Zoom in. Floods hit the UK. Do you remember those floods? Storm Ciara, Storm George. That was this winter. So those poor people are now shut down, locked down, wherever they are in their temporary homes. Right, okay, and on to the final bit here. What can humans do to prevent flooding? Well, for a clever answer, what you do is you divide it into two. You have a hard engineering, which is like making things, and soft engineering. So you divide this answer because it's a 4 marker, so it's a bit of a bigger answer here. So to do a good technique on this, you say, well, if hard engineering, we can build dams and embankments, for example. And for soft engineering, a more gentle way, in harmony with nature, we can plant trees, especially in the upper course of the river, to absorb the rainfall, and we can create wetlands. Basically, that means let rivers have their floodplains back instead of building on them, which makes a lot of sense. And in some parts of the world, they're actually doing that. Okay, so that finishes the revision section on rivers and coasts. If you want to mark it all yourself, that's great. Here you are, back to me. So that's the first lesson over and done with on our Ludgrove, virtual Ludgrove. Anyway, and so I will run through the weather and climate section for the next lesson. It also gives you a chance to do it if you haven't done it. I'll be setting a PR, I'm setting a paper, and I think we got as far as January 18 with the Swansea and the Mumbles Ordnance Survey map. So I'll be setting that as our PR for the first week, and we'll work our way through a couple more papers as the term goes on. And there are other revision topics we need to cover. I've got my book over there, hang on. The other revision topics I'm planning on moving on to. Here's my grand plan for common entrance. So we'll need to go on today, our January 18 paper we're on to. Topics we need to cover are population, transport, tectonics and settlement. If anyone has any special requests, then just contact me online, I suppose, through Teams or something.